before we go way deep down on this, we need to go all the way back. And I'm talking back to 2004. September 21st, 2004 to be exact. On this date, the biggest match in world football is being prepared to be played. No, not the World Cup final. No, not UEFA Champions League final. No, not, I don't know, insert any other final here. It's the US Open Cup final. Sporting KC are the home team after running through Atlanta Silverbacks 4-1, easing by the Dallas Burn 4-0, and knocking off the San Jose Earthquakes 1-0. They would take on early MLS dynasty, the Chicago Fire, who had a much tougher go of it getting to the finals, needing a 2-1 extra time win to beat Columbus, a 1-0 win to knock off Richmond Kickers, and yet another 1-0 extra time win to beat the Charleston Battery. They were a team that needed 2 extra time games to get past one MLS team. If that's not the most Chicago Fire thing I've ever heard. To this point, the KC Wiz had the MLS Cup and Supporters Shield double in 2000, but had yet to get a hold of the US Open Cup, never making it past the semifinals, which they had gotten to in 2002 just once before. Chicago, as we know, had a much better history of success since joining the league 2 years later, winning the US Open Cup 3 times to this point in 1998, 2000, and the year before in 2003. They also had the Supporters Shield from the year before and an MLS Cup from 1998, as well as finishing runners-up in 2000 to none other than the KC Wiz. So as you can tell, this game was about a trophy, but it was also about a heck of a lot more than that. There were bragging rights on the line, and this game did not actually live up to that hype. Two sides boasted familiar faces. The Wiz's talented side included the likes of 2000 MVP Tony Meola, which we all know was the greatest MVP year of all time, Jimmy Conrad, Jack Jewsbury, Davey Arnaud, Diego Gutierrez, and Josh Wolf. Meanwhile, Chicago had a lineup full of familiarity of their own, including CJ Brown, Jim Curtin, Logan Paws, Jesse Marsh, and Chris Armas. The story, however, that we are about to tell is not about the familiar faces, the big stars, or even the starting 11, but it's about a sub that was made by Bob Gansler to start the second half that changed everything. The name of that substitute was Igor Simuntenkov, excuse me. The Russian international who had an 11-year career in Russia, Italy, and Spain before moving stateside. A right-footed striker that had 20 caps for Russia at this time, scoring 9 goals, and also getting all right in America, finishing his career as the Wizards' highest ever U.S. Open Cup goal scorer. His final goal in this game, setting the pace at 5 goals in just 5 games over 3 years. Notching once in 2000, twice in 2003, and twice in his final year with a spot kick from San Jose to put them through to this final game, and the goal that most people likely remember him for in KC soccer history. Now, the biggest story heading into this game was not about Igor, but it was about whether or not the owner of the greatest MVP season of all time, Tony Meola, was fit to play after injuring his Achilles during warm-ups in the semifinal game versus San Jose. He didn't play in that game against San Jose, missed the match, and missed every game leading up to the final. Weeks of resting, weeks of preparation. And after all of that, he did, in fact, make the starting 11. While it was clear he was not very mobile, he was good enough to go. A relatively good-sized crowd for a U.S. Open Cup game in Kansas City. A crowd of 8,819 came to watch their team play in the final match of a tournament to crown the best club in the United States, even if the pitch was not prepared for such a match. Midfielder Kerry Zavanen was quoted as thinking, "It was a tough game, and the fields were not in the best condition." This was not a shock to many, as the Wizards were still playing as tenants in Arrowhead Stadium, the home of the Kansas City Chiefs. As the game took place smack in the middle of the NFL season, you can expect that it was pretty beat up for a soccer game, and it was. After all the preparations, the whistle blew, kicking off a cagey affair for a final match. Outside of a yellow card in the 21st minute and a Logan Paws 43rd minute effort that trickled past the post, the game was relatively quiet. Then, at the start of the second half, Francisco Gomez was removed for Igor Simuntinkov, getting an extra attacking player in the mix. The rest of the second half was equally as back and forth, with KC in the lead in the first half, with Davy Arnaud and Kerry Zavanin both seeing their chances fail to produce goals, as well as some other chances from the Chicago Fire later in the match that did not turn into a goal. That meant after 90 minutes, the game was headed to sudden death extra time at 0-0. From this point, it only took 5 minutes past the full 90 for Igor to write his name into the history books. He stepped up to a free kick after Josh Wolf was fouled by Evan Whitfield 19 yards from goal. Igor sent his shot towards goal, to which goalkeeper Henry Ring was able to get a hand to it, but it wasn't strong enough. The ball hit the underside of the crossbar and went over the line, sending the 8,819 supporters in the stands into a frenzy, as Igor had just scored a golden goal to win the US Open Cup. At this time, nobody knew that this would be the last ever, but it was still meaningful none the same. However, it is a bit of a shame on Chicago, who only forced an injured Tony Meola to make one single save throughout the entire 95 minutes. While Tony Meola was only forced to make this one save, he admitted that after the game, he was very, very uncomfortable and in a lot of pain. The decision to play him in this game would prove to be costly. The Wiz would go on and try to complete their second double in 4 years to win the MLS Cup. Though, without the assistance of former MVP Tony Meola, because as they would provide some very crazy games, as Connor may go into later, including a 3-0 second leg win versus San Jose in the quarterfinals, he would not be a part of it. His injury meant that he had to miss the entirety of the 2004 MLS Cup playoffs, which would see the Wizards lose to eventual champions DC United. Spoiler alert. While Igor may not be a household name to everybody, those fond of KC Wizards history will remember him as the player to bring home their first ever US Open Cup. And those fond of MLS history will remember that he is the single only final person to score the final ever golden goal in MLS history. Cry about it.
You're stealing way too much of my story.
Cry about it.
I will cry about it. That's not fair.
All right, in complete honesty, I wrote the intro after I wrote the story. So I wrote the whole story, went back to the intro, and was like, uh-oh.
Nah, that's fine.
I've got some other parts of the story in there.
I've got plenty of other stuff to talk about in here.
I hope so. Is it all about Metro Star Glory?
Oh, there is some great Metro Star glory in there. Don't worry about that.
Hook it to my veins.
How many, just out of curiosity, I don't know if you had seen this in your research, but I think you had mentioned that Igor had the most goals for KC in the US Open Cup. Do you know how many he had?
He had 5 and 5. However, it was broken in 2017 by Dom Dwyer, who had 7.
Oh, so this is just in one US Open Cup run.
No, it was over 3 years. So the KC Wiz played 5 games in 3 years. He scored once in 2002, twice in 2003, twice in 2004. But he did it over 5 games.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were talking about just like one US Open Cup run or if you were just talking about across history.
No, I did mention that it was over 3 years, but I know you don't listen to me ever, so.
I have a lot of podcast work to do, so I was catching up on podcast work.
Yeah, look at that. Not prepared, so unprofessional.
Had to do predictions, that's important.
Yeah, I'll tweet those out right now for you.
Yeah,